All right, it's just you and me today, wherever you are, if you're on the train, if you're walking to work, if you're on some kind of commute, if you're working from home and you're just, having a little brain break, putting on this podcast, let's hang out. And we've got some really good listener questions that we're going to be talking through. The first one is from Michael. Your question: what advice would you give someone considering a major career risk or transition, especially when you're stuck between fear of it not working out and the quieter question, what if it does? I love that, Michael. You have framed that in the most amazing way. It is the quieter question, what if it does? It's the one we don't actually tend to acknowledge. Okay, let's get straight in then. Couple of things. We all have this problem, and it is a big problem. It is a challenge for every single person listening, and it's this thing called automatic negativity bias. And we are hardwired to think about everything that could go wrong. And as we know, when we start to think about everything that could go wrong, it turns out we find a lot of things that could go wrong. And Michael, if you're listening right now, which I know you are because you do listen to every episode, which I very much appreciate, there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you take a risk. On the flip side, as you say, the quieter question, there's a lot of things that can go right when we take a risk, but we don't tend to acknowledge them. And that is because of that automatic negativity bias. So we fixate, and I would almost say hyperfixate, on the things that could derail us, on the things that could completely rock our career, our financial security, all that stuff. And with good reason, we need to be able to protect our long-term career and all those things. So that's totally normal. I think the key part about this is we need to be able to notice when we're getting stuck in that cycle and spiral of negativity bias, to be able to acknowledge it and go, okay, cool, this is normal. This fear that's coming up for me around taking a risk is a normal part of it. I just need to be able to work through it. And one of the things that, people listening might find Alex Hormozy's stuff, they might like it, they might not, but he does say this one really good quote that I have found very helpful. And he says, fear lives in the vague. And when he first said that, I saw it on a reel somewhere, fear lives in the vague, it really resonated with me because often when we think about, okay, I'm nervous about this decision, I feel like it could go really wrong, we're not quite sure of all the ways it could go wrong. We just have this sense of foreboding. And it's like this vague feeling of something's not quite right. And so what he encourages people to do when they're thinking about a big risk is that you have to move from the vague to the specific. And so what that looks like is, how do I get specific about the exact risks? Instead of just being like, oh, I could ruin my whole life by starting my own business, by having a major career change. It's like, well, that's too big. That's too vague. Of course, we're going to be terrified of that because it's terrifying to think about it in such big, uncertain terms. So we've got to break it down and get really specific. And so this is what he would recommend: define the real downside. So when you're about to take some kind of risk, let's just say you're currently an accountant. You've been an accountant for the last 7 years. You studied at uni. You've invested a whole heap of money into this career. And now you're like, I don't know if I love this. And I actually think I want a totally different career change. I want to become a buyer's agent or something just completely different to what you're doing right now. You might look at that and you're like, okay, I want that, or I'm curious about that, or there's some energy around it. But what if I ruin my life? What if I make no money? All the things. And so you can hear even the initial thoughts, the initial fears are all vague. So let's just go, okay, well, let's get clear on the actual downside, all the risks. And so what we want to do, and Michael, I want you to do this, and anyone listening who's thinking of a big career change, or even just a smaller risk, you're going to move from vague to specific. So you're going to write down, okay, what are all the possible downsides? What are the actual risks? And I want you to quantify what they are. Get very clear. Okay, if I go and do this buyer's agent course, that might be the first step towards the career change. What's the risk if I get in there and I realize I don't like it? Well, let's say it costs 10 grand to do the course. I have no idea. I'm making all this stuff up right now. But let's say it costs 10 grand. Okay, well, yes, if you get in, you do it, you realize, no, I don't like it. Yes, that's a big cost, but it's not as big a cost as quitting your job with nothing to go to. So we just got to weigh up and we go, okay, well, let's rank these risks. Let's look at all the downsides and then let's see how comfortable I am with those. So I want you to go, okay, list all the risk, every single one you can possibly think of. Then you're going to look at the cost of those. And then you're going to look at the likelihood. And this is the most important part, because most of our fear, the biggest fears we have about any career change, and the ones that feel most heavy and weighty, the impact of that risk happening might be catastrophic, but the likelihood of that risk eventuating might be low. So let me say it again. If there's a risk that's high impact, let's say I change jobs and I don't like it. Well, that's a high impact risk, but what's the likelihood of that happening? And you've got to work that out. And then you start to go, okay, well, if the likelihood of that happening is high, I've got to do some stuff on the back end to mitigate that risk. So the way you would mitigate it if you're changing jobs from a current organisation to a new organisation, you're not quite sure, the way you do that is you get a sense of the culture beforehand. You try and reach out to people maybe on LinkedIn who work there to get a read of what is this job actually like. You try to ask them all the things, like no surprises, what are all the things I should know about this organisation? So the way you mitigate that risk is by asking curious questions, by digging in deeper. So going back to this idea, fear lives in the vague. So I want you to try and get specific. You're going to list out every single possible risk, every single downside of taking the plunge, career change or starting a business or taking a new job. And then you're going to write the impact of that risk. What is the impact and what's the likelihood? Then based on those high likelihood risks, you're going to come up with some strategies to mitigate them. So that is, Michael, how I would first start.